So, good evening. This is lecture 2 for the Site Translation for Court Interpreters class. During lecture 1, we did a lot of we discussed a lot of introductory principles, such as stability and lack of instability, and what a stable term means, what an unstable term means. We didn't do any sites. We're going to start doing them today, but we're going to continue today with this idea of stability and lack of thereof by looking at other sites. And then the idea is to make sure that we can do this, you can do these sites with with minimum effort, I should say. And by that, I mean that you just go to the site and you comprehend why this long expression means this thing. As we discussed last week, things such as expressions such as le saluda atentamente su más fiel y seguro servidor. We said that was an unstable expression because it has two possible translations into English. And the two translations, of course, are, let's see, I got to get in here so that I can see your questions. So the possible translations are, yours truly, if it is a letter, but it would be respectfully submitted if it's a request. All those are the things you really need to memorize, not only the transfers, but also when to use the transfers, right? In other words, sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other transfer. Sometimes it's yours truly, if it's a letter. You respectfully submit it if it is a request. So you got to keep in mind those are the details that really will make you pass the exam. Knowing those differences are essential. So we did look at, we kind of look at the localization principles as well on 10 and 12. And when I say localization principles, we're really talking about equivalent structures in Spanish, in English, for the Spanish version, based on that idea of being a stable or unstable term, and also based on the idea that we discussed last week, where the interpreter is really a filter who filters all sort of interferences, interferences such as false cognates, which are called lexical interferences, interferences in terms of grammar, interferences in terms of syntax. There are different types of interferences, and your job as an interpreter in this case is to actually remove, the volume is too low. Okay, we'll move the volume up. Okay, so let's move the volume up. Okay. All right, so we move the volume up. What else? Could you please turn up the volume a bit? Yeah, we did that. Is that okay now? Still low? Better. Okay. It's going to change shortly because it's the highest we can get here. There is no other. Oh, wait a minute. It could be a little bit. Give me 1 second here. I can make it a little bit higher, actually. I think we should do this. We should always have in the highest one because if you're using a laptop, there you go. I think this is the highest that we can get. How is that now? Can you please tell me if it's good now? Okay, sounds good. Perfect. Better. Okay. Okay, so now it might be too loud, so be careful with your speakers. So going back to these principles of localization and all that, we need to be aware of it because, as I discussed last week, very few interpreters actually really even care about it. And whenever you take any interpreting course in the nation from anybody, they don't even discuss this. But it is actually the basics of why certain transfers are in one way or the other way. So in terms of that, what we can say is that terms, a given term in English, and we'll look at an example. For example, let's say, let's see, one that we did last week. Let's see. El declarante fue informado de las sanciones a las que se expone toda persona que declara falsos. I'm reading paragraph 2, site number 10. So it's el declarante fue informado de las sanciones de toda persona que declara falsos. This is in site number 10, second paragraph. So when you see that expression, what we are looking at is, okay, the first thing that we ask ourselves, of course, the first thing that you want to know is what's the proper transfer. And in this case, you should also know that this particular expression is a pretty stable expression. It's stable because it's unlike the term le saluda atentamente su más fiel y seguro servidor, which can take two different transfers, that is yours truly or respectfully submitted. In this case, this expression takes only one transfer. So we can say that this is a stable term. That's a letter S, okay, kind of a funny S, but it is an S. It's a stable term, so that's one thing. And then we also have to look at a proper way of localizing this term. And the localization into the opposite language is under penalty of perjury. So technically, when we see el declarante fue informado de las sanciones a las que se expone toda persona que declara falsos, we keep declarante as declarant, as we discussed last week, because if we consider la declaración as the statement, which usually we do, unless you know that it is in written, which in that case will be affidavit, and therefore declarante will be affiant, or perhaps if it's verbal, in which case declaración will be deposition, and declarante will be deponent. But there's no indication of either one here, so we use a term that works at all time, and that is a statement. So if we use a statement for declaración, declarante is declarant. So we will say technically, okay, so el declarante, the declarant, and then fue informado a las acciones que se expone toda persona que declara falsos will be under penalty of perjury. So when you look at this now and you put this in the transfer, it sounds like the declarant under penalty of perjury. But when we do this particular sentence and we review it, it's not a complete sentence. You can say the declarant under penalty of perjury. You can do that, right? So what we have here, and this is item number 3, is that we have an interference from a syntax point of view. And the interference is such that we need to massage the transfer. That's how it is, the word that we use a lot in translation. So for the declarante, you will say the declarant, you always have to have a subject, and declarant is the proper subject here. And then the rest, which is fue informado de las acciones que se pone toda persona que declara falsos, is under penalty of perjury. All that is under penalty of perjury. But again, because there is an interference in syntactical interference, you can't really say the declarant under penalty of perjury. So you got to just massage it. So now it comes the interference is removed by you applying the corresponding syntax in English so that it makes sense in English. So what's the message here? The message is that this declarant was advised, right? So it says fue informado. So what you're going to say here is the declarant was advised that this statement, or that you can say that this statement, either one, is under penalty of perjury. So that's actually, I don't know what this reload means. I don't know why this is asking me to reload. Oh, it's lost. Okay, so actually the transfer for that is, for all that is the declarant was advised, right, that the statement is under penalty of perjury. And you look at it and you say, okay, the Spanish is, el declarante fue informado de la sanción que se pone toda persona que declara falsos. So what you realize, when you look at it and when you're reading this side, you realize, okay, here I have expression. And this particular expression that it's here. This, it requires, it's a stable expression, and it requires localization, and the localization is under penalty of perjury, particularly the part that says de las sanciones a las que se expone toda persona que declara falsos. And then the next thing you say, okay, well, when I put it there, it sounds like the declarant under penalty of perjury. So now we have an interference. And it is syntactical because the syntax is incorrect. It's an incomplete sentence. That's the time when you actually do the necessary massaging, and that's where your knowledge of syntax in English, what it sounds correct in English, comes into play without changing meaning. And you will say the declarant was advised that this statement is under penalty of perjury. So this illustrates what we did last week, and we also briefly discussed the issue that has to do with lack of stability, unstable terms, right? And we have, for example, we talk about we talk about something like this, for example. The term court, no, it doesn't write. Okay, let's see. The term court, I gotta figure out what is wrong with this stuff. Okay, here we go. The term, let's see, we'll make it a little bit smaller. It's gonna be black, all right. So the term, oh gosh, 1 second, please. Let's see. I cannot write it. Okay, there you go. I think it's fine now. Okay, so they're fixing it for me. I just really don't know why I cannot type anymore. Oh, it's just so small. That's what it is. Okay. Okay, so that's the previous one. Okay, so we look at the term court, for example, and we said that the term court, when it's or when it transfers into Spanish, just to illustrate this, is a very unstable term because it has different possible translations. It could be juez, it could be juzgado, right? It could be tribunal, it could be judicial. And each of these terms, it's unstable at the fourth degree, right? There are 4 possible transfers for court when you see it in English. And you will say el juez if it says the court. You will say el juzgado when it refers to a courtroom. You will say tribunal when it refers to a courthouse. And you will say judicial when it has court, and then here comes a noun, such as court order or anything of that nature. So that's an example of what we call unstable terms. And the number 4 determines that there are 4 possible translations of the term court into Spanish. So really, if you want to be fancy about this, you will say the instability for the term court is from English into Spanish. Because if you look at Spanish into English, when you see juez, it's judge or the court. When you see juzgado, it's courtroom. There is no other option. When you see tribunal, it's courthouse. And when you see judicial, it's probably going to be a court and then a noun, like court intérprete judicial. So this nomenclature that you see here, when you see it on any type of textbooks of more advanced translation principles, which very rarely they use it also, it means that the term is unstable. So they will present it to you as this. So let's say you're looking up the word court in a dictionary, okay? This is how it should be presented. It should, right now they give you all the options. So they will say juez, juzgado, tribunal, blah, judicial, right? But really, the way it should be transferred, the way it should be presented is this way. Look, court, U4 plus, English into Spanish, and then provide the options. So when you, the reader, you read this and you say, okay, this word court has 4 possible translations, is unstable, so I cannot use this as synonyms. So it gives you further information saying that the lack of stability happens from English into Spanish. Sometimes you will see it like this. Look, not for court, for other terms. Let's say you see something like that, and you see English. When you see this, it means that this is an unstable term of the second degree, meaning that there are two terms. Two terms could work, could be the possible answers, but they are not synonyms, right? And this lack of stability or this unstable term is in both directions. So, for example, if I use, there are not too many both direction lack of stability or unstable terms. But you can say, for example, if you look at, let's look at this one. Le saluda atentamente. Atentamente is abbreviated in Spanish like this. Just let's look at only that. It could have su más fiel y seguro servidor, or you could have just saluda atentamente. This term is unstable of a second degree, and it really is unstable into both directions. Why so? Because when you transfer that into English, you have two options into English. It could be yours truly, or it could be respectfully submitted. Respectfully submitted. That makes it unstable of a second degree. This or this, and they are not synonyms. This will be one, this will be number two. Now, you as the interpreter, as the filter here, look at it and say, okay, well, it's unstable, so which one do I use? Well, look at context, because this lack of stability is usually a term that is unstable can be made stable by looking at context. So you'll say, okay, this is a request, right? So this is a request. It's a letter that it's more like a letter requesting something from the judge. So my answer is respectfully submitted. Okay? So now, why is it unstable, English into Spanish and Spanish into English? Let's say that I want to say from English, respectfully submitted. Okay? Now, I have two options. I have le saluda atentamente, or maybe even more, right? Saluda atentamente, okay? Okay? Or I also have lo dejo a su debida consideración. If we were going now from site translations from English into Spanish, and you see respectfully submitted, you know, it could be le saluda atentamente o lo dejo a su debida consideración. So you can say this is also an unstable term. And in this case, it's Spanish into English. This one was English into Spanish initially, but, you know, it's a term that is really unstable in both directions. And it has the same degree of instability, 2+, second degree. So you would say, well, wait a minute. So when do I use le saluda atentamente for respectfully submitted? Well, if it is a letter, a request, you can say le saluda atentamente as the ending of a letter. But if it is not a letter, it's a verbal decision, and then the attorney, let's say, for example, that the attorney appears before the judge, and the attorney says, Your Honor, based on the circumstances of the case, I submit that the defendant should be released on his own recognizance, respectfully submitted. This is verbal. So you cannot say le saluda atentamente, because le saluda atentamente is only for written material. If it is verbal, you will transfer that as lo dejo a su debida consideración, and any variations of it. Sometimes they say lo dejo a su consideración, lo dejo a su debida consideración. So when we analyze this term, just the term le saluda, the saluda atentamente and respectfully submitted, they're basically unstable into both directions. This happens not often, but it does happen a lot. Now, you don't need to know this necessarily, but if you do know it, then it makes you a much better interpreter, because you can explain a lot of different transfers by knowing this variation. Now, for you to be able to know that, for example, that le saluda atentamente is respectfully submitted, and so is lo dejo a su debida consideración, for you to know this is part of your filter, of your knowledge, right? And you need to know that we use in Spanish le saluda atentamente only if it is in writing, whereas we use lo dejo a su debida consideración if it is verbal. So that's the knowledge that you have, right? And therefore, if I have to transfer respectfully submitted from English into Spanish, I have to ask myself, is this a letter or is this a verbal request? That's all. If it's a letter, le saluda atentamente. I mean, you can even add su más fiel y seguro servidor if you want to. But if it is not a letter, we say it verbally. This is the main reason. Okay? Main reason, what I just explained. This is the main reason why when you interpret using the simultaneous mode, you may use certain terms. But when you interpret using the side translation mode, you may use different terms. Because one is in writing, the other one is verbal. The message is verbal versus writing. For example, if you use the verb to issue in English, okay, so let's just take a look at the verb to issue. Okay, so if I look at the verb to issue in English, this is unstable of the second degree from English into Spanish. And what are the two possible options? Well, most people say emitir, but there is a second one, expedir. So which one do I use? Well, if it's in writing, it's expedir. If it is verbal, it's emitir. If the judge issues a decision, emite una decisión. And any synonym of it, because you say, well, can I use another term instead of emitir? Can I say, I don't know what other term would you use, but sometimes there are similar terms for to emitir una decisión. Can you say pronunciar una decisión? Of course you can, but only for verbal. You wouldn't use pronunciar for expedir, see? So, because pronunciar is a synonym of emitir, but it is not a synonym of expedir. So when you look at this verb, like the verb to issue from English into Spanish, which is unstable in the second degree, two options, emitir or expedir. Which one is the correct one? Verbal is emitir, which you may have other synonyms such as what? As pronunciar if you want, and any other synonyms that you can find. But if it is written, it's expedir, and we don't have any other synonyms for expedir when it's written. So you cannot say pronunciar, use it as a synonym for expedir, because by definition, pronunciar is verbal. And so is emitir, unless you're talking about emitir billetes de dinero, which is a different thing, right? So this idea is very, very critical, very, very important. Unfortunately, the reason why most people don't even pay attention to this is because everybody is obsessed about words, and all you want to know is the translation of the term. And that could get you into a lot of trouble. And the reason why it could get you into a lot of trouble is because you are missing the essence of the transfer. See, it's not about a transfer only. It's about a transfer in context. See, context tells you what the transfer is. But that context, really what it does is it basically stabilizes the term that is originally unstable. Translators do this without even knowing what they're doing. What do? They translate and then they read it again to see if it makes sense. Very unprofessional way of actually describing the process. What a translator does is makes a first translation of a given term, understanding that it is, and also identifies the lack of stability or the fact that the term is unstable, and then reads it again to see if context can stabilize the term so that an exact transfer is produced in terms of the original versus the transfer message. Okay, so I know this could be a little bit advanced for you, but you're a good group. You're a really good group. I want to make sure that you become as professional as possible. So I'm going to, don't worry, I'm not going to be giving you, don't start thinking about, oh, my grade, is he going to test me on this? Who cares? Just learn it. Just learn it. It's going to separate you from the rest of the crowd when it comes to you being a professional interpreter. And it's going to help you tremendously in the delivery of terms in both directions. In this case, we're looking at Spanish into English. Now, you may say, is this idea of stability and instability, we're going to concentrate on number 10, slide number 10 next. But you may say, is this idea of stability and instability only for legal terms or regular terms? No. There are a lot of slang terms that could be a problem, right? They could be a lot of problems. Look at this term, all right? Compadre. What's the so this is a very unstable term. It's unstable term of the second degree at least. And it is from Spanish into English. And the reason why it is unstable is because the transfer is it's not that the transfer is unstable only. It's the origin of the word unstable because of its use. In Mexico, a compadre could be a very close friend, but he could also be the godfather of one of your kids. So here we have a term such as compadre that in the original language is unstable. That's not the case with things such as le saluda atentamente. This is stable in the original language. That's in Spanish. But the transfer could be unstable because it can take two forms. In this example, compadre, it is unstable in its original language. So that's why we put a little O on right there, meaning that it is in the original, it is unstable. It could mean two things, compadre. And therefore, if any term that it is unstable in its original language will carry the lack of stability into the transfer. So in Spanish, this could be un buen amigo o puede ser también el padrino de uno de sus hijos. So that's the instability in the original term. So when you transfer it into English, that instability is going to remain. And the transfer of this term into English will definitely be a function of context because we really desperately need to know that how to make this stable in reading it. I read a document, okay, in Spanish, even if I don't have to interpret this into English. And it says, mi compadre participó en el delito, en el intento de asesinato que sucedió tal y tal día. Now, in Spanish, without transferring to English, because that term is unstable in its original language, I need to find out in Spanish what it means. Am I saying, in my mind, is it my buddy or is it my, the godfather of one of my children? Or it could also be that I am the godfather of one of his children. Look how complicated it is. So I need to find out their term in terms of context. So I read the document and try to figure it out. And if I don't know, my comprehension of it is kind of blurred because I can assume, I read it, I can assume that the person who wrote that affidavit, right, is actually referring to compadre as a close friend, but then someone else may read it and may assume that is referring to that person as the godfather of his children. And a third person can read it and said that, no, he's the godfather of your children. So you can see these complications. So really it's more than two, it's more like three if you think about it, than the lack of stability.